Hey, it's Emma. Welcome back to Behind the Smoke by Nicotine. Today we have Maureen to answer a few questions that we have.
What kind of diseases can you get from smoking?
Unfortunately, there are many, many diseases that you can get and other health harms. Among them, lots of cancers like bladder cancer, stomach cancer, lung cancer, we know. In fact, 95% of all lung cancers are caused by smoking. You can get all kinds of mouth cancers, cheek, gum, tongue, throat cancer, obviously. And then many respiratory ailments, things that affect your lungs, like normal breathing. Over years of smoking, you won't be able to breathe normally because it affects your lungs. And then there are other conditions that are exacerbated by nicotine use, including heart disease, diabetes, and others.
How do people die of it? Do they die in their sleep? Do they just stop breathing? Or how does it happen?
Lots of different ways. That's a very good question. For instance, my dad had stomach cancer. He died of actually malnutrition. Because he had stomach cancer, he couldn't eat. They did feed him with a tube for a while, but that was a pretty awful condition and awful death, and he decided to discontinue all treatment, and he died of malnutrition. Just all the organs stopped working. For some people, it's a breathing condition, like if you have COPD or emphysema, you literally can't breathe. And when you can't breathe, you're not giving oxygen to your brain shuts down, and then all the organs shut down.
So are you saying that your dad got cancer from smoking and then?
Yes, absolutely. So his doctors, when they were treating him for the stomach cancer, said that it was, given his history, his life history, it was undoubtedly caused by smoking.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
A terrible death.
Do you possibly know how cigarettes are made?
Sure. So cigarettes are from the tobacco plant. And by the way, if you were to Google most deadly plant in the world, do you know what you get for an answer?
Tobacco?
Tobacco. So tobacco is not the most poisonous plant. There are others that are nightshade and some others that are more poisonous, but tobacco is the most deadly because of the way we use the tobacco plant. So tobacco plants are grown on a farm. They're harvested. They're dried or cured till they get to a certain point of dryness and readiness, and then they're chopped up and put into the different products. Like it might be cigarettes, it could be cigars, it could be pipe tobacco. Then they can be rolled into cigarettes, so a paper cover for the cigarette, and other ways they can be loose tobacco, or again, cigars are actually rolled in a tobacco leaf, so it's chopped up tobacco in a tobacco leaf. And what the industry did several years ago, because they felt there wasn't enough nicotine in the cigarettes to start with, so they chemically added nicotine to the cigarettes, because, as we know, the higher the nicotine, the more apt people are to get addicted, and that's the goal of the tobacco industry, get people addicted.
I heard at one point that there's miniature shards of glass in it. That's how it cuts your tongue, and then the nicotine seeps through your tongue.
So I'm not sure about that. I'm not a scientist, and I
Yeah.
haven't done that kind of research, but what I do know is that there are many harmful ingredients in a cigarette, including tar, which is part of what causes the cancers. But also, believe it or not, something that I learned recently, the cigarette filters, so the tobacco industry said, okay, we'll put filters on the cigarettes, make them less harmful. So two things happened. One, people thought they could smoke more because they're using this filter, right? When actually they're getting the same nicotine in their lungs. They're still getting addicted. But also, filters are made of plastic. And the single largest cause of plastic debris or pollution on our Earth is not all the plastic Dunkin' Donuts coffee cups or plastic bags that we see readily, that we're aware of, that we're trying to battle all the time. Worldwide, it's actually cigarette filters. It's a hazardous waste.
That's insane.
Have you ever experienced a family member smoking or just secondhand smoking?
Another good question. So, as I mentioned, my dad died of stomach cancer, and I have other relatives. I had a grandfather who died of bladder cancer. I have a grandmother who smoked and died of throat cancer. All terrible diseases, terrible death. But also my mom, who never smoked, but lived with my dad for 60 years, who did smoke, got terrible asthma to the point that every night, you know, she was 90 years old, she'd have to get up, sit on the edge of her bed, and have a nebulizer treatment because she got asthma from my dad smoking. In fact, one time I remember I was driving her home from a family celebration, and she had such an attack. I was looking quickly to see what's closest, the emergency room of that hospital or the fire station. And I went to the fire station because it was a teeny bit closer, and I knew she needed immediate attention to keep her alive because she was having such a bad asthma attack in the car. So I have seen firsthand the effect of secondhand smoke.
I'm so sorry.
That's
Yeah, it's
pretty scary.
Scary, very scary.
How old were you?
I'm an adult, so my mom was, you know, my mom was in her probably early 90s. So I was an adult, but driving and very concerned to see this person gasping for breath. It's something you don't want to see.
Can you elaborate on what like physically happens to like kids when they smoke, and like how like the timeline and what happens to your respiratory system, like your lungs, like that?
You are all asking such good questions. So it varies by individuals. Some people are more susceptible to cat dander, and they'll have a quicker reaction. It took me years of having cats before I developed an allergy to cat dander. Now I am allergic to cats, and kind of the same with nicotine use. Some people will be affected immediately by nicotine use. They're susceptible to addiction. The nicotine receptors in the brain fires off, and once they start using nicotine, they need that nicotine fix. They're in their classroom and they suddenly can't listen to the teacher anymore. They're thinking about getting to the student restroom so that they can vape and get that nicotine hit that their body craves, that their brain craves. So in other things that happen to everybody, but young people we're talking about right now, is that it affects concentration. Nicotine use affects concentration. It also, for older people, and probably for youth as well, but for instance, you can't join the military if you use nicotine because nicotine affects concentration, night vision, decision making, and if you're focused on that need for that nicotine, just like in the classroom when you're thinking, I gotta go to the restroom and get that and vape, same with a police officer or a firefighter or a military person who's really, instead of focusing on saving that person, half of their brain is thinking about getting a nicotine fix. Causes anxiety, causes your heart to race. Some people get very bad palpitations when they're smoking. So there are many, many different effects. And again, different people will be affected differently.
Oh wow. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure that I saw like a police officer smoking on the job. So like I don't know how much like of like a rule that they have like for it or like a rule that they have in place. But I've definitely seen like some like first responders or someone else doing it. Like
Sure. So actually, it's a fairly new rule for most fire departments and police academies and the military. In fact, years ago, my dad we talked about him and the cause of his death, but he started smoking in the military in World War II because they gave soldiers and sailors free cigarettes. Because back then we thought it was a way to relax and wind down and chill and so on. Now we know better. The first couple of drags make you feel like that, but then you put that cigarette down and very shortly your brain is saying, I need more. So some years ago, people could join the military, join the firefighting force, go to the police academy, even if they were smokers. But for kids graduating from high school now and try to join the military, they will not be allowed to join the military because we know how bad the nicotine addiction is, not just for the individual, but for the rest of the whole fighting force. If you've got a soldier beside you who's affected by nicotine, and thinking more about the nicotine than what's happening in front of you, then that's a detriment to the entire force. So the military is aware of that, and they've banned smoking.
Good decision.
It is. You're right.
Okay, this kind of might be a stupid question, but have you like ever like wanted or tried to smoke or vaped or anything
So,
before you decided
Right.
to do public health?
So 100 years ago, or maybe not quite 100, but almost 100, you know, I'd be in a crowd where we'd be out for the evening and someone was smoking, and you know, as we do in social environments, sometimes we say, oh, try this drink, try this cigarette. So I did, and it was horrible, made me just want to cough, tasted terrible, and fortunately I had no other interest and didn't do it again. And if I had, I might be in a very different position, because we know how addictive it is and how easy it is to get hooked on nicotine. In fact, nicotine is the most addictive substance, more addictive than heroin and harder to quit than heroin. Medical practitioners tell us this, but also people who've used substances, and some people have used addictive substances, have used many of them. So you start with nicotine and then go to alcohol and then go to other, you know, drugs, and they say nicotine is the worst to quit. And in fact, some of my colleagues will say when they're talking about nicotine, remember, nicotine is tobacco products, the only legally sold product in the United States that when used as directed kills, and kills half of its users. That's the data.
I can't believe the police and the government. I can't believe the police or the government haven't even banned it yet.
Tobacco use in the United States is an interesting topic. It started back actually with our indigenous people. They use it for cultural and ceremonial reasons, to celebrate, to mark certain events. But then we landed in in this country, on this land, and we started using it and trying it, and then we used it more for fun and social events and so on, and then used it to a point where we became addicted. Not we in this room, but we generally, American people, became addicted. It became a very profitable crop. So farmers realized there was a market for it. They could plant this crop, it's very hardy. Then they could make cigarettes and cigars and loose tobacco for pipes, and they started doing that and made a lot of money. There are a lot of plantations in the South that did this. Actually, there are still farms in Western Mass where they grow tobacco. And when there's a big market for something, it makes money, right? And then when there's a lot of money, there can be a lobby or people who are interested in helping those growers, those farmers, those manufacturers, those retailers who sell these products. And that lobby will go to Congress or go to our state house and remind our legislators that this is an important crop. It's a money-making crop. So we need to not regulate it, or don't regulate it as much, make sure it's available for everyone. So there's this yin and yang. You know, we know it's bad for us. We know statistically, scientifically, medically, it's harmful. On the other hand, there are people who make their living from it. So we have to decide what's more important. Do we find a better use for tobacco plants? Actually, the University of North Carolina, where a lot of tobacco grown in North Carolina, they're doing research on trying to find better uses for the tobacco plants so that the farmers won't have to turn that tobacco into deadly cigarettes.
Good idea.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't like a lot of like government officials also probably smoke or vape?
There could be. Vaping especially has become very popular among lots of age groups now. And among people who didn't even smoke. So we now have young adults who never smoked, but vaping is very cool. Looks very cool, sounds cool, the devices are very cool. I think when we met one time, I might have shown you some of the new vape devices.
Yeah, I think you also showed us like the nicotine pouches too.
Right, and pouches have become very popular in I'd say the 20 to 30 age range. And the industry has worked really hard. They know smoking rates are down, so they've got to come up with new products because they need replacement customers. So they're looking for products that will attract a new market And with pouches, they're so discreet, that little tiny bag of nicotine. In fact, it's not even tobacco, it's lab produced synthetic nicotine. They make it in a lab, and they can make it any strength they want. So where a pack of cigarettes has 24 milligrams in the entire pack, so a pack of 20 cigarettes has 24 milligrams, whereas a little tiny pouch could have as little as 3 milligrams or as much as 30 milligrams. A single pouch, which you put between your cheek and your gum, saliva dissolves the powder, quick zap to the brain, that single pouch could have 30 milligrams of nicotine in it. What's the reason they would put so much nicotine in it? Money, exactly. So you'd be more apt to be addicted. If you become addicted, you might become a lifetime user. If you're a lifetime user, you're going to spend a lot of money on your tobacco products.
Yeah, we recently went to New York for a school trip. And the amount of people, when we were walking through Times Square, the amount of people who were smoking and vaping was insane. Like every 5 seconds, I would walk into like a puff of smoke from someone, and I would have like a full-on coughing fit. Because like I'm very like sensitive to like those kind of stuff. Like I grew up with my nana who was smoking all the time, and I grew to like have this like sensitivity. Like I can't stop coughing if like inhale it or something. And like every 5 seconds, like I would have this just like coughing fit because I would just keep walking into these puffs of smoke.
That's
it was
very
so bad.
disappointing.
It wasn't even like just smoking in general. It was just also like there was like a lot of vapes too.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I saw one of these like teddy bear vapes also. The ones that we saw, it was like brightly colored, and like everybody there was like so many people walking around Times Square, and like everybody just had something in their hand, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Just why?
Social media pushing these products a lot, we know. Now we see entertainers on TV. You watch an Emmys program, Grammys program, or whatever, and you see people vaping. And some people think that vaping is better for you. Well, we don't really know that yet because we don't have the decades of data that we do with smoking. We've known since the 1956 Surgeon General's report just how bad smoking is and how many cancers it causes. It's the leading cause of preventable death in the United States. Almost 500,000 people in the United States die from smoking-related disease every year. Almost 500,000 preventable death. And then the industry says, well, vaping's better for you because it doesn't have the tar and other things that a cigarette has, right? But a vape device, as we've discussed previously, has oil as its base. And in order to inhale that nicotine-laced oil, which also might have many other artificial substances in it, like, of course, the nicotine, but artificial aroma, artificial color, artificial flavor, so all these chemicals, you're heating that up and you're breathing a very thin oil mist into your lungs, and that blocks the small airways in your lungs and causes irreversible damage. Once you've damaged your lungs in that way, there's no recovery. And also, in order to heat that device, you need a little battery. So e-cigarettes come with a lithium battery. We know lithium batteries are highly volatile. That means they can combust spontaneously. Can't take them on an airplane because they're too dangerous, right? And then that battery heats up a metal coil. And that metal coil is made of known toxic metals, cadmium and nickel. And over time, that little tiny metal coil, some of those metals will break off into microscopic pieces. Now that's coming out in that aerosolized mist that you're inhaling, breathing into your lungs. So that's now in your lungs. And we don't know, and it might be decades before we know clearly what other cancers might be caused by vaping. We know some of those metals cause cancer. We don't know what happens when you heat them up and they become part of that oil mist that you're now breathing into your lungs.
Do you know like the Chinatown in Boston? Like that
Section,
yeah. So my mom actually used to work at South Cove, that little mini hospital. I go there, like I used to go there every year to get my teeth cleaned. But now whenever I go there for like my mom's haircut, my brother's like maybe like a doctor appointment, like anytime I go there, whenever like I like inhale a puff of smoke, I stop breathing for like 30 seconds. I can't breathe. It scares my mom.
Yeah, it's scary. It's amazingly effective in affecting your lungs. Absolutely.
Wow, that was a lot of questions, but at the end of the episode, see you later, dudes and dudettes. Stay tuned for another episode of Behind the Smoke, Why Nicotine?